Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Stand and Talk from the Jewish Stand. I'm your host Shmuel von Weisl, and I'm so delighted to welcome Yotam Eyal all the way from Israel. Yotam is the CEO of Legal Forum for Israel, an NGO that fights for Zionist values in Israel in the legal field. He holds an LLB from Sapir College and an MBA from Ariel University. Yotam has appeared numerous times in the Knesset, has issued multiple legal bills and published articles in various journals and newspapers, including the Jewish Stand. I should add, Yotam wrote an article on the Jewish Stand, which I highly recommend everyone read, as always. It's called Explained Israel's Attorney General Crisis. And if you really want to understand what's going on in Israel, you should really read the article. I highly recommend it on our website, thejewishstand.com. But if you haven't, don't worry about it, because we have brought Yotam all the way over from Israel, as I said. Yotam, hi, how are you? How's your family?
Good evening. Thank you very much for having me. I'm fine. It's the time in the year you are in Chodesh Av, so it's a little time that people not so happy at this time. But the family is good. Everyone good. I don't have any complaint.
No, well, thank God for that, Baruch Hashem. 9 days today. We are commemorating the days leading up to the destruction of the Second Temple, and well, I think we can get right into it. Hopefully, we're far away from that, but let's talk about your article, Yotam. Your article described Israel's broken legal system, where the Supreme Court and Attorney General have different responsibilities compared to their equivalent in other countries. So could you explain this in a little more detail for those who haven't read the article, as well as also explaining how this situation came about?
Yeah. So it's a good thing that you mentioned that we need to start in the beginning, how it's got into this point. Because in order to understand what's happening today in Israel and mostly in the judicial system and the thing that we need to fix, we have to go to the past for understanding how everything got settled in this structure. So let's go to 48. 1948, Israel got established. The state of Israel. And when they established the state of Israel, there was in the middle of a war. Actually pretty similar in time to the war that we have today, but obviously it was a different war because it was about survival. I mean, when the Israel state was established, they was very busy in fighting in 5 different armies of different states, and in this time they didn't have the option to solve all the issues that they knew will raise in the further time. So one of the issues that they didn't raise was, for example, if Israel will have a constitution, and they didn't want to decide in this issue, because when you establish constitution, in certain states you don't have constitution, but in other states you have. So when you establish constitution, you have to touch in the most hard issues, the most problematic issues in your society. For example, you have in Israel today, you have Haredic people, I mean Orthodox people, you have modern Orthodox people, and you have secular people. And today it's the same. We have a debate about if the Orthodox people will go and serve in the army. The same question was in 48. Because the same question was in 48, and there was in the middle of a war, we didn't want to solve all these issues. What will be with Shabbat, for example? Will Saturday will be a day that you can do things, that the state will give you the option to do things in the state or not. I mean, for example, drive today, it's the same question if you can drive in a public transportation or will not be a public transportation, and all this issue was still in 48. So they decide not to decide. They established something called Harari compromise. That means it was a guy named Harari. He suggests that we will not decide in these issues. We'll start do it step by step, and eventually, when we finish all this step by step, we will do a constitution from all the steps that we pass through the way. And in order to do it, they establish something named basic law. Basic law is actually a law that just got a title named basic law, but eventually is supposed to be part of a constitution. That was the main idea. Now, if we're going to jump 30 years later, it was the same situation. I mean, we got some basic laws, but we don't have any constitution. And now we need to go also for the demographic of Israel. And at this time, there was only one party that actually controlled Israel. And this party was the Labor Party at the time, named Mapai. And David Ben-Gurion was a member of this party. And around 30 years later, in 77, the Likud party won the election. Now, until then, the Labor Party controlled all the structure of Israel. That means, I'm saying they control Israel. It's not only the politician. They was being in the judicial system, in the army, in every office that you can think about, because they controlled Israel. There was socialist, and the idea was about centering all the power in this party. Now, in 77, there was the Likud won the election, and that was something crazy, because no one even thought about the option of the Labour Party to lose the election. There was a big problem. The Mapai party had discussions. What we're gonna do right now when we actually understanding that we're not gonna win the election every time. So there was idea about taking the power from the politicians, because we don't control the politicians all the time. So we're gonna put it in a places that we actually will still have effect on the state, even we were not gonna win the elections. And if you look on any state, there is only one place that actually have roots in every office, and that's law. The question about law. For example, every office, you go to the minister of defense, he have someone that need to counsel him about legal aspects of his work. Same thing about the finance office, and it can go for any office. So if you taking the power into the hands of these judicial people, the people that controlling the law, they have the option to control the state, and that's what happened at this time. Now, for these years later, this power kept going in lots and lots of different rulings and different laws, and eventually this power got concentrated in the judicial system, mostly focused by the attorney general and the judicial and the judiciary. And because they have all the power, so now we have a big issue about the balance between the politicians and the judicial system. It's not something that's going in every state, but actually today, this thing is, you can find it in the different states also. It's not only something that's unique to Israel. It's the same thing, similar in Canada, in the United States, in a different states that the people got and concentrate this power into these places in order to control. So it's not unique to Israel, but in Israel, it's definitely the most extreme from any other state. And also, I'm American citizen also, but as a Jewish, I care about Israel. So eventually, when we're speaking about Israel, we need to understand that Israel is the most important place for us as a Jewish people. And because of this, we know that it's happening in also other places, but we need to first to fix the issues that we have in Israel in order Israel to keep going as a Jewish and democratic state.
Right, there's so much to unpack there already, just out of the first question. Before I really get into it, as I read out from your biography earlier, you have been also heavily involved in this field, in the Supreme Court, the judicial wing in Parliament. Could you maybe tell us a bit more how Yotam got into all this as well?
So that's it. I'm gonna start when I was 15 years old. There was the evacuation from Gush Katif. And the evacuation explanation, it depends how you want to name it, but eventually I was 15 years old that wants to demonstrate against it, and I went into the protest and I got arrested. and they kept me in custody for around 72 hours. I never saw a judge in these 72 hours, and I didn't have any other. I was with a group of people. No one, I mean, take care of us in a regular, in like you need to take care of in a prisoner. And I mentioned I was 15 years old. All this is illegal in Israel. I mean, you have rules that actually establish that you have to be in the, especially if you are a minor, you have to go in front of judge in few hours. And all these things that we got arrested and kept in jail and all this stuff was illegal, but no one cares it was illegal. And it's not only no one cares, it's actually we think that all the judicial system actually came and they took this illegal acts and they in purpose, they did it in purpose, and the judiciary actually approved this. So we saw something very I don't know, it's not unique, it's something that's very strange. We believe that we have a judicial system that's supposed to protect us in when we are protesting about something as because this is the laws. But in the moment that they didn't want our purpose, I felt on my flesh that they are against me. The same thing. We passed the evacuation of Gush Katif. I was there. I was involved in evacuation. I was staying in Kfar Darom at the time, one of the settlements that was evacuated, and I felt all these things. Few months later, Ariel Sharon, that was prime minister, he got stroke, and Ehud Olmert replaced him. Ehud Olmert, he want to punish us. And when I mean punish us, so the evacuation of Gush Katif, you need to understand that everyone, and it's actually a good time because it's exactly 20 years for the evacuation of Gush Katif. So when we are speaking about it's 20 years anniversary for the evacuation of Gush Katif.
Yeah, it's something that people like to connect as well, is that it's 20 years ago in Tisha B'Av time, which is also, a time known to be really bad for the Jewish people historically.
And it's supposed to be in Tisha B'Av, so they delayed it in one day because they didn't want it to be in Tisha B'Av. But anyway, a few months later, the evacuation of Gush Katif, everyone spoke about how the settlers will be violent and there will be fights between the violence and the cops and the army, and the settlers will take weapons into their hands and will shoot the army. And that was in the media for a year long. Just everyone speak about how we are dangerous people. And what happened in Gush Katif was actually, it was very quiet. I mean, people protest, but they walk with soldiers, and everything was. I mean, you evacuating 8,000 people and all the people that come to support them, and there was no violence, and it's something that was actually very bad for the prime minister, because after you're telling to the public all the time that there will be a violence and these people are so bad, and suddenly they think something else, it's very problematic to them. So what happened is that 4 months later, there was another evacuation, very small one, in a settlement named Amona. Amona is in Binyamin region in Judea and Samaria. 9 houses that the Supreme Court ruled that need to be demolished. So and everyone that was in Gush Katif, a lot of people came to there and said, we want to protest because we are feeling that something that we didn't do everything that we can. And I was one of them. And not only me, my young brother was there also. And what happened there is that Ehud Olmert, as the prime minister, gave an order to teach us the lesson to not coming and protest again. The result of Amon evacuation was around 400, I think 400, I don't remember, but a few hundred settlers injured. And one of them was actually in a critical condition. A policeman broke his skull and he was a clinical dead for a few seconds. And that was my young brother. Now, when we came, this is what my experience for this time. I was 16 years old. I was 17 years old. He was 15 years old, something like this. And we felt how you feel when the police are going against you, the judiciary coming against you, and no one actually from the police was standing into a trial. Eventually, it was around 2 policemen that didn't got anything. Uh, they was released and even promoted in the role for their job. So eventually, you felt all the system getting against you. And I think what I'm telling right now, it's not only my experience. This is the experience of Bezalel Smotrich. This is the experience of Amit Segal. A lot of people in Israel. Amit Segal is the most the most known media person in Israel. Smotrich is the minister of finance, and all these people telling the same story. In Gush Katif, we understand that there is a problem in the judiciary, and we need to fix it. And that was what happened at this time. So this is my personal story. Now, after I served in the army, I was in Givati. I served in the army, finished my service in the army, went to study law because I knew that I need to change the things that happen in Israel. We can't be in a state that the judiciary, that everyone, all the system can go against the civilian, and no one will be in his favor and keep his human rights. There is no one cares about our human rights. So that's my personal story.
It's really incredible, your story. I mean, I couldn't say anything that would really sum it up justifiably, because it's in the first episode that we uploaded was Shaked, who also grew up around the same time. He was also 15 when it happened, but he wasn't in Gush Katif, he was in the center. He mentioned this idea of how Israeli politicians at the time were not chasing peace, but were chasing a peace treaty. Living in this illusion that if they could just give and give and give, whatever that giving would look like, if it was land, if it was moving the Jews away from their homes, in order to give to create another Palestinian state, as he mentioned it, then that was the illusion that would create peace. And here we are 20 years down the line. We know the consequences of what happened with the 7th of October being the direct result of that, really, when Hamas immediately took over. But I think there's so much to go into in that. But I think what I'd really like to do then is, now that we've understood that there's the concept of the history of the Supreme Court and how it became more judicially active, where it got more involved in politics, and how your personal backstory proves that the Supreme Court isn't necessarily something that we like to say that the Supreme Court is something to protect minorities, if it is in the interest of the Supreme Court. And clearly, in your case, it wasn't in the interest of the Supreme Court to protect you. So
no,
I guess the next question, yeah.
The opposite. It was the opposite. It not only was not in his interest, it was exactly the opposite. The Supreme Court ruled to arrest little girls around 13, 14 years old and put them in a custody for weeks. And just for protest. They didn't do anything else by standing in the roads. So we saw what happened when the judiciary coming against you. It's not only in against its favor, it's how they coming against you.
So I guess the next question that we can really ask is then before October 7th took over the news, right? If we move on to today, and we jumped a couple of years down the line to the consequences of that time, and we saw the politicians and the Supreme Court working against, as you said, the Israeli interest. So before October 7th took over the news, judicial reform was a huge topic, and it led to massive protests across Israel. How does that fit in to all this of what you were talking about?
So actually, the judicial reform, in the time of the judicial reform, there was a big article in one of the papers that says the house where the judicial reform was established about me and my dad. And and why? Because in 2005-4, my dad established the organization that I'm standing in as a CEO. And this organization, the Legal Forum for Israel, was actually established in order to help stop the evacuation of Gush Katif in illegal matters, and also help the people of Gush Katif to get constipation money for their houses and the work and all this stuff. Because in 2005, the government didn't want even to give them money that can give them the option to keep going after evacuating them. So we actually lost in the main appeal to the Supreme Court. We lost, because the main appeal was about stopping the evacuation of Gush Katif, and obviously we all know that they didn't stop. But we won in the term about giving them constipation money and that they can actually let's say they can try to make their life again. And that was the one thing. But the main issue that was raising up from that was about all the things that we spoke about, that the judicial is actually politician. It's not about just anymore. We're not speaking about justice. We're speaking about that the judiciary became politic party. And when we start, and so we start looking on the subjects about issues in the judiciary. We start look on the things that happen in the judiciary, and we saw, for example, that at this time, all the people that was internship in the Supreme Court was family of other of like, for example, the daughter of Aaron Barak was making internship with other justice. And
Aaron
everyone was
Barak being the president, being a former president of the Supreme Court.
Yeah,
so his daughter was interning.
Exactly, and everyone was. We find out that everyone is actually a family. When they said we are a family, it's not speaking only about connections, family like a friendship connection. There was a family. They actually had a family connection, and every son or daughter was internship or even wife. I mean, Aaron Barak's wife, that if she was around 50 years old when she decided to go and study law, eventually she got internship in Supreme Court, and later she became a very high role in labor sorry, I would say labor court. Now that's things that can't happen because they actually had a very very close place that push their friends into this role. Another thing, and how it all happened, because they controlled the committee of appointing judges. So they actually appoint their friends also to be a justice. It's not only the internship. Eventually, they appoint their friends becoming. For example, a very, very interesting story is about the story of how Aaron Barak was behind the nominee of very close friend of him, Dorit Beinish, to become a justice in the Supreme Court. And what happened, that in 92, I think 92, the government decided to send some terrorists to Lebanon. That was the idea. It was after a lot of terror attacks, and they decided to expel them to Lebanon. And what happened is that Aaron Barak didn't like it. He came against it. And Dorit Beinish was in the actually, she wasn't a justice at this time as Aaron Barak. She was in the prosecution, and she was supposed to represent the state in this case. And she decided not to do it. And she says it's against my conscience. Now Aaron Barak really liked it because he was against it, and he lost in this case, because eventually the Supreme Court, the Chief Justice of Supreme Court at this time was against him, was Shamgar, and Aaron Barak was in minority at this time. But he had a very close relationship with Dorit Beinish that working together him, so he appointed her later to become another justice. And that was how this relationship actually kept going in this system. But we didn't know about it at this time. We find out that everything is corrupted, and I can say it straightly. It's corrupted. You bringing your friends into the role that can control Israel, and that's something that not happening in the politicians' field. That's happening in the judiciary. So we understand all this stuff. We try to start finding out all these things that they did. And one of our lawyers, volunteer lawyers in my organization, in the legal forum, was Yariv Levin. Another volunteer lawyer is Yossi Fuchs. Yossi Fuchs today is the secretary of the state, of the government, and Yariv Levin is the minister of justice. So when they decide to go into the judicial reform, the idea about it actually came from our organization. So this is why when we're speaking about the judicial reform, all this stuff that we revealed at this time and we walk into reveal them and in order to try to fix them at this time, this came into this point that the judicial reform was established, and was the main issue in 2 years ago.
So you really get a sense of like then you being really involved in the or your organization really being involved in these ideas of the reform, because essentially on the one hand you have an increasingly closed group where the Supreme Court are not only nominating each other but they're also grooming each other of people who they agree with to become more involved in justices. But not only that, we know that they're increasing power or increasing closeness is also becoming more politically homogenous, as you say, because they are more, if when they nominate each other, then they can also get more activistic and they'll be able to pass or rule certain cases in a much more favorable direction from one side or the other. So then that's what happened in the judicial reform. Could you maybe tell us a bit more about then what was the big protest about? Why were people protesting against the reform?
Okay, so the judicial reform as it established, it was pronounced to the public. It wasn't in a good way. Eventually, it's not about the issues in the judicial reform. It's about that we didn't. When I say we, but I wasn't the one that was publishing it to the public. I was the one for bringing the ideas, one of the people with the ideas behind it. But as represented to the public, no one explained to the public and made a campaign about explaining people why it's necessary and what is it all about. And eventually what happened is that in the moment that was represented to the public, this group of people in the judicial that controlling all this system, they obviously decide to go and fight against it. Now, it's really easy and to scare the public about it. And there was too many issues that actually made people scared about the judicial reform. One of them was we spoke about a religious state. And a lot of people that doesn't care about this judiciary, that doesn't care about all these issues, got really scared because they scared that in the moment the politicians will get power and let's say the judiciary can stop them from happening, from doing this what they want to do, there will be a religious state that stop them from living their life. Now that's a nonsense. And why it's nonsense? From many reasons. One of them is that the majority, and I speak the majority, the majority of the public in Israel doesn't want it. I mean, eventually, when you look on the minority that actually thinking about it, it's very, very low percentage of the public. I mean, around 5% maybe. Now, obviously, the government and the coalition didn't act as one unit, and every day one of them raised a bill proposal into the table that doesn't have even the option to pass. It's just about I want to show my voters that I'm actually doing something. And people got scared because I'm going to take you for one example. It's very, very funny and sad example. For example, there was one bill proposal that was raised by Haredi party that every person that got into the kotel with clothes that does not following the laws of the dat, for example, not snuim.
So not modest clothing or immodest clothing.
Not modesty will be get fined or get arrested. Now, why it's funny? Because this law is actually existing today in the law book in Israel. No one is applicable at it because no one wants to do it. But eventually, this is already exists. So why you are raising another thing that can just for showing your voters that you will doing something, and the result was that the public become very, very scared. And I'm actually understanding why they got scared, because our representative didn't do it smartly. Now another issue is about Netanyahu case. And a lot of people says, I want to fix the judicial system in Israel, but I don't want to give the power to do it to a corrupt prime minister and corrupt government. Now, that thing that I don't think Netanyahu corrupted. And there is a case against Netanyahu right now that getting like for in the last 7 years already that didn't getting into a certain point that you can say that probably it will not find anything, let's say anything severe against him. So this case is something like that, but people got scared because people say I don't want to give these people corrupted because the media for years now, this is what their main agenda. Netanyahu is corrupted. We don't want to give him a power to do things, and all these issues became into the point that people got scared and got into the street. Now today, for example, if you're going and ask people in Israel, I think around 80% at least will say we need to fix the judicial system in Israel. Now that's a huge accomplishment because 2 years ago most of the people will say don't touch it. Now people will say we need to fix the judicial system. So I think actually even that the judicial reform didn't pass as judicial reform, there is a good influence about the long term, about changing what we'll do in the long term. So I'm not looking at it as a huge failure.
Right. You definitely see 2 points that really come out from what you're saying, and also you can understand when the reforms came out, there was also some who were there were some voices who showed. I remember seeing this quote from even, I think it was Yair Lapid or Gideon Sa'ar, a lot of people themselves, ministers or former ministers who were sitting in the opposition at the time, right? Gideon Sa'ar today is in the government, back then he was in the opposition, who were advocating for judicial reform. And they were also, at the same time, in the front lines of these protests against the reforms themselves. And you can see that maybe there was something else beyond it being the reform themselves were fine. So fine, we can maybe have this debate about which type of reforms we should be doing. We should be having stricter controls on the reforms or not. But we see that the protests were more. It was more of a political protest than it was a judicial. And it brings into the second point where how difficult it is to create such reforms in Israel. You know, as much as we know that Israel is so innovative. I'll give a quick anecdote from my dissertation, which I hope you'll forgive me for giving an undergraduate dissertation. But there's this article by a good expert in the field of public administration from the University of Haifa, who wrote an article covering the extent of public administration reforms, so civil servants and bureaucracy. And he wrote this sentence. I think he wrote this article in 2013. That really kind of, saddened me a bit. And I think it would anyone as well. Essentially, it was since 1948, there has been no comprehensive public administration reform in Israel. It means that as much as the world has been changing and there's reforms in judiciary and there's reforms in public sectors, in Israel, it has been static since 1948, because of wars, but also maybe there's something to say about political pressure, about whether you need to have some politics involved in it as well. What do you say to that?
No, so I will say first of all, I don't think Israel didn't change, and when there was reforms, even not named as reformed, I mean, a lot of things got changed at the time, and we need also to remember that Israel is a very young state. I mean, eventually, if you look, for example, on United States, you will see that things got changed in hundreds years, and we are only like I don't remember that's 78. We are very very young state. So when you look on this thing, you need to look on the in the eyes of people from not from laws from the law studies, people from the state studies. I mean, and states getting changed in much, much longer time. Now, it's a good point that you raise it, that you said, I don't think that even, I know I'm a lawyer, my expertise in constitutional law, I called myself a constitutional expert in a state with no constitution, but eventually, when you look on this, it's not a question of law. It's a question of social. It's a social issues in Israel. This is why when we started this conversation, I mentioned the difference between the Labour Party and their focus on this system. It's not about, we can keep going and speak about if it's exactly by going by this law or other law. But eventually, there is two groups in Israel that fighting about controlling the state, about the structure of the state, how the state will be. And if I actually put it in two different groups, I will say the one that cares about Jewish state and the one that doesn't want a Jewish state. I think, and that's the main two groups. Eventually, when you look, and I know I didn't put democratic in the process because I think Israel is a Jewish democratic state. I don't think that democratic is mostly a tool, and the character of a state is mostly about if we will be a Jewish state or non-Jewish state, and you can see by the verdicts or by the ruling of the Supreme Court between the years that this is the main issue. For example, immigration. If there are people that not Jewish or in Israel can go and infiltrate Israel, and if you can, so Israel can do something about taking them out from the state. So the judiciary ruled that the Supreme Court ruled that Israel not allowed to do it. Now that's changing the demographic of the state. Also, if about issues, for example, if Muslims can go and married to someone from Gaza, for example, and get citizenship. That changing the structure of a state if there will be a Jewish state. So all these issues that was raised between the years, this is the main battle that we have. And obviously today in Israel, demographically, 80%, I think around 80% of the population want a Jewish state, at least. But even they want a Jewish state, as I mentioned before, in the judicial reform, they got scared from other issues because it didn't came into these issues. It was unrevealed. All these issues was behind the scenes, and when people didn't understand the main issues that we have. Now, right now, people understand because, for example, in the war in Gaza, so you can see that the Supreme Court taking, for example, is dealing 80% of his time with the terms of the Nukhba of the terrorists of Hamas. For example, that way they will eat, if they get a Medicare, and all this stuff. Now, people seeing it. People say, why you are dealing with the terms of the people that got into Israel, and murdered our families. So people in their voice, in their logic, understand it's something that the Supreme Court doesn't even need to be involved at. And when they see the Supreme Court ruling in these issues and dealing with issues, and they said we are so busy, but they actually 80% of the time they are dealing only in these issues, that's something that people can't agree with. So it's a lot of examples that eventually giving us to understanding that this is a social. It's a political issue, it's a social issue, it's not about law. We're fighting in the law terms because it's in the judicial system, but it's a political issue that we have to fix in order Israel to be a democratic state. I know I said it's about the Israel with Jewish state, but also if we're not going to fix it, Israel will not be a democratic state, and then the majority, the 80% of the people in Israel, will not have any influence about the character of the Jewish character of a state. This is why it's the most important issue today in Israel for fixing. Because if you're not going to fix it, Israel will not be a Jewish state and not democratic state.
You explained excellently from giving us the whole introduction of how this came about, how the situation came about from 1948, and also your personal involvement, and also why, just what you just said now, is how important it is that in Israel domestically, at least for you, it's so important to be still talking about this. But I'd want to now maybe ask you a bit more of a challenging question. This will be our final questions, as I'm aware of the time. For us Jews living abroad, we see the news, we see, for me in university, I was asked constantly when people were approaching me and I was setting up tables and advocacy for Israel and Judaism, people asking me, but why are you advocating? Look at the judicial reforms. You see how the protests were saying that Netanyahu is corrupt and the whole system is going to be corrupted. That's why I think it's important to know, that all that we saw the past 3 years was actually more of a judicial or political demonstration, and it was maybe broadcasted in a different light by certain media outlets. But in your opinion, why is it important that we still talk about it today? Or even is it important that we still talk about it? Can we maybe move on from this issue around the world? Or we maybe even hyper-focusing, for us Jews around the world?
Yeah, so it's actually two questions. One is why we are still speaking about it. The other one is why people abroad, people all around the world, supposed even to be care about these issues. Now it's two different issues that actually combined. The first one, we and I mentioned before, we have to deal with issues in order to Israel to be a Jewish state, and also about Israel being secure. As I mentioned, when the Supreme Court is actually dealing about with question of a battlefield, and that question that doesn't even need to be going to into these places. I mean, soldiers doesn't need to think if someone will be and behind them and write down if they do something wrong, or scared about doing things in the field and about protecting their lives. So when if we want Israel to be secure and staying and keeping a Jewish state, we have to fix this issue. Now, also, when we're looking about the world, uh, so people, I believe that at least all the Jewish people in the world need to be care about Israel. And it's not only need to be cared about Israel. I think they care about Israel. And Israel have also impact on their lives even if they don't care about Israel. And it's not only Israel. I mean, before Israel was established, there was the Holocaust. We all know what happened in the Holocaust. And people that even didn't want to be a Jews. They didn't want to be a Jewish, and they came and hide. They still, there was people anti-Semitism that came against them. Same thing happening today. Every time it's excuse. They found excuse about attacking and raising up anti-Semitism. And it's funny. I actually by myself got attacked a year ago in Barcelona, uh, by a group of Muslims, just because I have this on my hand. So I felt the anti-Semitism in the world. Now I didn't spoke with them. I just walk on the street. So I know what happened to Jewish people. Why we need to hide our identity, and this is why every people in the world need to be curious about Israel, because Israel is our homeland. Eventually, there is a state for the Jewish people, and this state is the places that making us secure. And even that we are fighting right now in a war, and there is lots and lots of voices against us. Right now, we're speaking about maybe starving Gaza and immorality of Israel. I know it's a lot of things that always use as excuse about attacking Israel. But when Israel is strong, it's giving everyone the power, every Jewish people the power, becoming strong. And this is why when I speaking about fixing Israel, the Israel state, and I believe Israel state is amazing. Amazing. I think we have the most amazing state in the world. I will never give up on Israel state, and even that we have such a huge issues to deal with, with I call it, we're looking at it with a pink eyes. I mean, eventually I'm looking at it and I say we are going into a good place. Now we need to fix these issues in order to Israel to be stronger, in order to Israel to be more Jewish, and in order to Israel about democratic. I mean, eventually when I'm going to the election, I want my vote to be count, to have the option to change something in the state. So this is why it's important. And if we're not gonna be on this, so Israel will not be exist anymore. And Israel will not be exist, that's gonna be problem of all the Jewish people in the world. This is why I think it's combined together, but it's and I think everyone need to be care and want Israel to be the most Jewish democratic state that we can have.
Yeah, Yotam, you really explained as well how important it is for us Jews across the world to really have that stake in Israel, to really care about it, to look into the problems that we hear from the news, from the media, and question it and ask these and look into what is actually happening. And of course, if I could just plug in the Jewish Stand here, this is exactly what we try to do: is to give what's going on in Israel to the next generation, to this generation of young Jews who care about Israel and care about our Judaism. And so Yotam, on that note, on that very optimistic note, excited for the future, optimistic and going in a good direction. That's an excellent message to end off. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Stand and Talk episode. And everyone, again, I highly recommend you all to check out Yotam's article on our website, and hopefully many more articles to come as well. Yotam, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I'll see you all in the next one. Bye bye.